Thank you, Council President, and co-sponsor Councilmember Mink. And I want to thank her for co-sponsoring this legislation. As we just all discussed, I think it was unanimous co-sponsorship of the last bill, so I think it's going to pass. We all agree that we must reduce traffic and pedestrian fatalities, but we also all agree that we should reduce systemic disparities in policing. We saw over the last several years, after the murder of George Floyd, a global outcry for change in how we interact with law enforcement and what the rules are to wield the great and significant power that's delegated to them by us, the people. That, unfortunately, at the federal level, yielded no action as far as legislation. I'm very happy to say that at the local level, on the previous council, we did take action, which is really important, as did others across the country, to pass the Law Enforcement Trust and Transparency Act to ensure independent investigations, to pass a use of force bill that raised the standard of when deadly force can be used and added prohibitions against things like chokeholds and shooting and moving vehicles. And we recently passed the Community Informed Police Training Act that will help bring in a new generation of police recruits to keep our community safe and work in partnership. But there's more we need to do. In his State of the Union address earlier this month, President Biden spoke for more than 5 minutes, historic amount of time, about the need for police reform, and gave voice in the presence of the parents of Tyree Nichols, who was murdered in Memphis, to the issues that are seeking to be addressed in this bill. He said, and I quote, "Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, playing in the park, and just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children." He went on to say, "Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I've never had to have the talk, had the talk with them. I've never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn on your interior lights right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got into the car," end quote. He was shedding light on something that many of us in the African American community and other communities of color have had to deal with for generations. The fear, the indignity, the devaluing that comes from disproportionate contact in traffic enforcement. This bill, the Safety in Traffic Equity in Policing, or STEP Act, seeks to shift enforcement for low-level traffic violations to allow our law enforcement the ability to focus on serious crime and serious traffic offenses while addressing disparities that have for too long plagued our community. Just to say a quick word about what the bill does, because there's already been a lot about what it does and doesn't do that hasn't all been correct. It limits traffic stops for low-level, non-moving violations. Any speeding, moving violation is still a primary offense that can be pulled over at any time. It also requires more robust data collection and reporting on traffic stops, because we need more data about, for example, why someone was stopped in the first place, which we currently can't track very well. The goal is to promote fairness, to reduce racial disparities, promote safety, and reduce community trauma, to improve community policing in our county, and to further the county's Vision Zero goals. By shifting police out of certain types of traffic enforcement, we can make sure that they focus on the more urgent needs: reckless driving, DUI, speeding. And we can also, at the same time, create better relationships with law enforcement, build better data and reporting on what's happening in police stops, and again, prioritize Vision Zero. As we wrap up Black History Month today, I'm reminded of our theme, Black Resistance. We must challenge ourselves to live up to the ideals of Dr. King, John Lewis, and others, and take a hard and sobering look at the inequities that impact our friends and neighbors, even if they're not ones that impact us. There is no other issue, I think, in the Black community that is experienced different than other communities than policing. And I've said that since we started this council, and we've done work that I'm proud of to make sure we right size and focus and support and improve the training for our law enforcement community. Driving while being black is not just a saying. It's an experience that many have had, including myself. Black and brown mothers and fathers have had that talk and continue to have it, especially for their sons, and they worry every day when they go out. It cannot be legitimately denied that this is a part of our identity as a country and a county, and that these tragic and sometimes life-ending but certainly dehumanizing stops are a common occurrence that we see play out in communities every day. We must protect drivers and pedestrians, and we all share the same goal of keeping everyone safe. We must also build trust in our community and provide officers with the resources, training, and time to be most effective with how they are conducting their jobs. I invite colleagues to join me in this conversation. This isn't a perfect bill. It does model legislation that's passed in the city of Philadelphia, that's pending in the city of Memphis, that's pending in the state of Washington, in the city of San Francisco, and other places. In the state of Virginia has forms of this already in place. To have a collective invitation to continue our re-envisioning what law enforcement's role in traffic enforcement is, and to limit the risks of these dangerous low-level traffic stops. Finally, the data bears this out. It's not perfect, but it bears it out. A report that I requested over 2 years ago that recently had a hearing from our Office of Legislative Oversight confirms that in addition to nationally black and Latino drivers are disproportionately stopped and searched, we also have the same issue here in Montgomery County. And I quote from the report, while overall numbers of traffic stops declined between FY18 and 22, racial disparities in traffic stops have persisted or worsened over the 5-year period. Black drivers accounted for 30% of the stops, despite being 18% of the population. Latino drivers were 21% of the stops, despite being 19% of the population. White drivers were underrepresented in traffic stops based on their share of the population. In response to this lived reality of black and brown residents and the overwhelming evidence of racial disparities in traffic enforcement, the STEP Act will address these while keeping our roads safe and make sure that our law enforcement can focus on the most pressing safety-related needs in our county. The bill is limited to initial stops for moving violations. If an officer observes someone for speeding and observes one of these other stops, they can issue that ticket. It would also limit when a consensual search can be made of a person or a car during a stop, such that a police officer can only conduct that search if they have a reasonable suspicion or probable cause for a criminal offense, which is the Fourth Amendment standard. I've heard from many residents who have talked about being pulled over and sat on the side of the road for an hour or more as their car is searched and nothing is found, and have to get up and deal with that. That should not be happening in our community. During the course of this bill's discussion, we will hear directly from these residents about those experiences and about why it doesn't produce safety. We must grapple with this. It's not an easy conversation, but hopefully it will force us to rethink how we address these low-level traffic offenses. I look forward to the Public Safety Committee's review this summer and the public hearing. We cannot afford to not act. Too many members of our community live in this fear every day, and we must step up and enter the conversation. I appreciate the time, and I hope folks will co-sponsor and join us in this important conversation. Thank you.